I'm getting like over 1 cow per acre in this system, which is 2.5 times of what you should have in here. But through 4 years of rotational grazing, I've built that up to be able to get that many. And now there's 2 different neighbors of mine that I'm grazing for here. There are 25 head in here of Black Angus and a Longhorn Black Angus. She's an old granny cow. She's been around forever. And there's 3 South Poles. Some of my neighbors were able to acquire some South Poles out of North Alabama, and they ran out of grass in the wintertime, found out that I was doing some custom grazing, called me and said, can we bring 3 over? And I went and asked the other cattle owner, right? He had a herd here. I felt like he should get to say, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. So now I'm getting to experiment with 3 South Pole and some Angus to see the difference, and there is a difference.
And the South Pole is the brown one out there, right?
Yeah, the red, light red. The South Poles are about 800, 850 pounds. The Angus are about 12 to 13, 1,400 pounds in general. But I have noticed distinctly on a hot day, the 3 South Poles will be out grazing when all the cows are under the trees. And when they first came here, I was shocked about how small these cows are. And it was one of those things where, like, I knew the economics of it. I knew that because they're smaller, you should be able to put 2 or, 1.5, where you can put 1 or whatever the math is. There are 2 Angus cows, you can fit 3 South Poles because of the weight. And the economics are, if you've got that many more cows, so instead of 30, you had 45, that would give a small homestead farm, cattle rancher, more babies to sell. And they do make sense. But seeing them so much smaller, you're like, how does that make sense? But like I've seen now through a couple weeks of grazing, like they're just a more efficient cow for the southern area for grazing and turning grass into protein.
Interesting.
They're very good at it.
So tell me more about how much your soil has improved. You said that you're getting more cows on the same amount of acreage. I'm assuming like the nutrient density is probably going up in the meat itself. And just for the land and just the improvement. There's a lot of talk about how cows are bad for the environment and this and that, which is completely not true. But tell us more about how that all works.
What I would like to say about those things where they say cows are not good for the environment, they're not talking about this, right? They're talking about a feedlot with 5 miles of cows packed in. That's what they're talking about. So this right here is not bad for the environment. I know that. As I started grazing cows, one of the things that I noticed is that they don't eat everything, right? They can get pretty selective. So if you bunch them up, it can cause them to graze everything, but you still have stuff in there they won't eat, or you're having trouble with it. And that is the reason I got sheep. I originally got sheep just so they would eat the things in the field that the cows wouldn't eat. That has helped improve my health of the pasture. The main thing was buttercup. If you look around the South here, all the overgrazing that's done, continuous grazing, causes the buttercup in the springtime to come up into this beautiful yellow flower for most people, not for some farmer, because it's a disdain for me and Mom. But I can remember 4 or 5 years ago, friends coming from Louisiana, and they were just like, oh, look how beautiful the fields look. And it was just invasive species of weeds. Like it was yellow flowers everywhere. And this spring, when they came back, they're like, where's all the yellow flowers? I'm like, well, there's still some there, right? I didn't get rid of all of them. But because of rotational grazing and letting them have rest, that it gives the grasses a chance to overpower the buttercup.
Buttercup is one of those plants that is sprayed for usually. So that's now something that Blake's not doing on his farm. I don't think he ever did, but less poisons as well. So when you're grazing correctly, all of these different species of grasses come up that are beneficial for the animals. And then now the farmer is no longer needing to spray any poisons as well.
So when I started with cows, they weren't eating those things, and I knew I needed to add sheep to the program. And so I started looking at hair sheep instead of wool sheep. When I was a kid, we had wool sheep, and I did not like the way it tasted. And the reason I didn't like the way it tasted, because as we were bathing our lambs, washing our lambs, getting them ready for show, you got the lanolin on your hands, and I knew what that smelled like, and that's what sheep meat tasted like to me, is what that smelled like, and I couldn't do it. And I found out that hair sheep don't really have those lanolin glands to keep the wool oily, and so their meat can be a much milder flavor of red meat. And in that world of hair sheep, you've got the Katahdins, the St. Croix, several others, Barbados, and then with the Barbados, there's an American black belly. And I like this breed for a couple of reasons. One, they were a heat-tolerant breed because they were from Barbados. Two, when they got to Texas back in the late 1800s, those boys put some horns on the males by breeding them with some white sheep. And then they bred them back to Barbados. So the American black belly has this beautiful rack of horns that comes out on all the males. So I was like, I think that's the one I want, because I have neighbors that I grew up with showing animals that have wildly successful farmers that have a grand champion flock of Katahdins. And I just didn't want to compete like locally with someone who was already doing great stuff. Now, theirs weren't grass-fed, theirs weren't rotationally grazed and all that. But I chose the American black belly, and it took me a year and a half of searching to find a flock that I could buy that was somewhat local. I could find them in West Texas, and I could find them in Wisconsin, but I couldn't find them in East Tennessee. And so 2.5 years ago, I got a flock of American black belly. It was 5 rams and 5 ewes. And my goal with the sheep was to build up a herd of 40 ewes, because I felt like with 40 ewes, I wouldn't have to have the cows on the farm anymore to graze. My sheep flock would almost be big enough to take care of the grazing for that. I will say, like, the more I get into it, the more I want to lean into sheep and not so much the cows. Sheep won't try to kill you for the most part if you touch their babies. But they're just, I enjoy managing the sheep a whole lot. So I found the sheep, and then when I got the sheep on the farm, that's when I realized that a electric fence that was tall enough to keep the cows from jumping was too tall to keep the sheep from going under. And something too low to keep the sheep from going under, the cows would go over. So I had to do 2 lines of electric fence for a long time. And I was wanting to get to a 1-line fence for everybody, because 2 lines is just twice the walking doing it. So if I could efficiently teach them how to get to 1 line, it cut out half of my work essentially for the day, and would make it easier to move the animals. Mm-hmm. So this was a struggle, but I've come up with a system now using a couple different types of fence posts. And if we see, this is one of the earlier step-in fence posts that I got on the farm, and it had 5 spots down through here. And so what I do is, when I'm using these, I go between the 4th and the 3rd one, alternating the line up and down, and it's just about 8 inches of difference up and down through there.
Each post,
yeah, every other post, it goes up and down. It's like a W or a wave going out through there. And so far, it's not 100%, but in the last 2 months that I've been doing that, there's been very few days that the sheep have gotten out from this line. Mm-hmm. I've got a few places in the rest of my fence where they can find a hole through. Yesterday, I put them up 3 times until I finally grabbed a net and just put a net out in front of the place where they were getting out, and that solved the problem.
Yeah, Blake's American black bellies, when he got them, I got a couple of them too and got to experience them, and they're such a more wild sheep than the other sheep that I have, like the Katahdins.
I like the term exotic.
Exotic. They are. They are really beautiful. I'd say they're better in every way compared to Katahdins or St. Croix. They grow to slightly bigger size, better parasite resistance. They'll eat a little bit more variety of grasses and plants, but they're just more difficult to keep in. They take more management to deal with. So if you're willing to put in that extra effort, and like Blake has, and really figured out a system, then they are quite amazing. And my couple of black bellies that I had, actually, they ended up teaching my St. Croix and Katahdins how to escape. So I sold back my mama back to Blake, and he has her here now.
Okay, I found the sheep down here, and they're not in the paddock with the cows. I don't think. Wait. Oh, wait, no.
Oh, they're down
They
there.
are. I saw my neighbor has some baby calves over here in his field. And I saw some ears flapping, and I thought, oh, great, here in the video we're doing and my sheep are out. They are not. As we go down through here, the sheep have chose to lay down here in the shade. Oh, baby calf.
Oh.
Don't worry about him.
We just scare that one off.
Yeah.
It'll come back.
So I now have 29 of these sheep, and of those 29, only 6 of them are boys. So I'm to 23 females right now, so I'm getting there. August is my next expected delivery date of babies. And this year so far, I had 12 babies born, and of those, only 3 of them were males. And so that was a good cycle for me. So I'm expecting sheep again in August, and that's gonna put me closer to my 40 number. So next year, the sheep that are born probably in about April will be my first flock of sheep that I will be open to sell to people as breed stock.
Nice.
Because it's so hard to find these sheep. What I do with the sheep now, I keep all the females, and any male that I want to move out of the herd. Maybe his horns aren't as nice as the rest of them. I have one in here right now that has a white stripe on his side, and I love the white stripe. It's from those 100-year-ago genetics just expressing themselves. But I don't think that I want to keep that in the herd for a long time. And so when I first started dispatching the sheep for the meat, let me say that took 2 years.
Yes.
From the time I got sheep to the time I had a male that I could dispatch to try.
Yeah.
Was I even right on, do these sheep taste great? Turns out they taste fantastic. Such a mild red meat but it 2 years, and when I first started dispatching them, I didn't know how to keep everything that I could. And so I was composting a lot. And then it just got to me that I didn't feel good about composting a beautiful pelt like that without learning the skills of how to save the hide and make a rug into it. And so I'm about to dispatch the one with white, and I'm going to attempt tanning my first hide to make a rug that I can sell. I'm going to European mount the skull that I can sell, and then I'll be able to sell the meat as well. So by having 3 revenue sources off of one sheep, it's probably going to push me up towards the $700 mark per sheep that I can harvest here on farm. Now, there's a lot of work to go in with that, but I'm excited to get into saving every bit of the sheep that I can since I have this very specific breed.
What would be the average money someone could get? Probably $350 or $400 or something? Or what?
If you sell it live, maybe 300,
Yeah.
something like that. In today's market, they just had a big sheep and goat sale here, and 300 to 400 is probably doable. When I sell for breed stock, I think I'd like to get $350 per sheep live, but that'd be for a lamb.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be a good profit level for me. If I can get 40 ewes giving birth, if I can get up to 2 lambs per ewe, that would give me, at least 80 lambs to sell at $350. It only took 3.5 years to do that to make money at sheep, but I see a path forward with making money with the sheep. So Stephen, when we talk about like the transition of the farm to regenerative, where we are walking right now, I was driving a skid steer through to push down privet hedge 6 years ago. I couldn't even really walk through this area. And so you have to start like pushing down all the brush, then bush hogging everything, coming through and trimming off tree limbs and cutting trees out of the way. But I'm so excited about this little area because in really hot days like we're about to have, it makes grazing this super easy because the cows can come down here in the shade. And
everybody's down here.
Yeah, they've grazed all they want to. Their bellies are full.
Now they just like chew the cud.
They're just chewing the cud. Here's my set of triplets that were just born 2 weeks ago. You can see this mama in the front here with the 2 ear tags. Look at her belly.
Oh, yeah.
She's
probably got something in there.
We're getting closer. There's that ram right there. The white markings on him. His horns are beautiful. but because of the white markings, I'm going to dispatch him, but turn him, you know, into a lot of different things. And by the way, that's a 1.5 year old ram.
Nice. It's a good size.
The one behind him was a baby when they came here, so he's about 2.5, and I love the way he looks.
So your champion, your #1 guy in there?
He is. Now I still have Hercules over here. Hercules is 6 years old now. Hey buddy.
He's real friendly.
Yeah, I can rub on Hercules, he likes it. He is from Wisconsin. And so it's nice to have some bloodlines that are from the Alabama, Mississippi area, and then his bloodlines in Wisconsin. He's, every couple of weeks he gets a little limp on his foot, and I gotta check him, but he's just older.
Yeah.
I decided he's probably not gonna go anywhere unless someone wanted him for breeding purposes. But Hercules, hey, are you gonna come up?
Mama.
That's about as close as they get sometimes.
I mean, this is pretty good because when you started out, we were not able to get this close.
No.
So they
No,
really
not to any
softened
of
up
them.
and warmed up to you.
Now let's go right over here and look, you can see this cow is drinking out of the water tank. And so a key for cattle to me to keep them cooler as well is to always have a good supply of cool water. If you have a big 500-gallon tank, which is usually what 60 animals like this would take, that tank is going to set out here in this hot sun and get really warm. And so they won't be able to cool themselves down by drinking water, they're just getting the hydration. And what I have is just a 50-gallon tank with a high flow float valve on it. And so as they drink the water, the valve goes down and starts filling up the tank again. And then whenever it fills up, and now we have cool well water in here, feel that.
Oh yeah, that's nice. It's like 60s or something.
And I keep it right in the middle of the line for a very important reason. If I was to move this tank out just a few more feet, they would knock that float off of there. So the electric line gives the cows enough room to put their head down and drink water right here and then get back out. And they learn that if they start getting pushy and pushing each other around to fight for the water, they're gonna push one of them into the electric line. Then everybody's got their nose in the tank gets a pop. And so you'll see them like correct the bad behavior real fast. Like, no, you get out of here, you can drink later. But having the water line in the middle, or the power line in the middle is really the key to protecting that water source. And then this hose is coming over here. To this quick connect that's just right in the ground. And so it's a male adapter that goes into a female adapter in the ground.
And was this part of all that grant that you were talking about?
This was, yeah, part of the grant. This was some of my leftover material that I was able to add a water line down here for this. But this was all through the grant money of putting this in. So this female line here is a pressurized water line that comes from our well, and it is always on. And it has this little yellow cap to put over it just to keep it from getting dirt in there. And when I flip that back, pull that piece of grass out and push that in, it locks in and water flows automatically. So I don't have any valves or switches or anything like that to turn. And then whenever the cows move over there, I have another one over there. So I just pick that up, dump the water out, and it's light enough that I'm able to carry it most places. If I'm moving it way across the farm, I'll come get the tractor and use it. But having just a 50-gallon tank and a water hose, I can usually lug that as far as the cows are gonna move. And then whenever like this comes up, that goes on, and I use an old plow disc as my cover.
Nice. So if you were driving a tractor, you could just go right over it?
Just go right over it. If you're bush hogging down here for some reason, it just goes right over it.
Right.
Having a hole in the center of it is a big advantage, because what happens in the summertime is there's heat concentrated right here, and the fire ants love that concentrated heat, and they will build nests all around here. And so 2 or 3 times a year, I do have to come down and sprinkle fire ant powder around this spot. to keep them away or get bit.
Yeah.
And having the plow disc like that makes it easy for me to take a little metal hook and pick that up and see if there's fire ants around it.
Yeah.
To move it out of the way.
The fire ants are really aggressive here too, I've noticed.
Yeah, real aggressive. But we can walk through this field on the way there. This is going to show a few different examples of what happens with grazing, and with grazing the flurred together, we're talking about mob grazing, keeping them contained in an area that has enough food for them for the day, and then moving them to the next area and letting this rest. This field has been a challenge. It was hay for a long time. It was a crop called switchgrass for a few years. That was a program Dad did with the state. But getting a lot of grass in here and not a lot of weeds has been a challenge without the spray. Out here behind me is a good example of what I've been battling with. It's called bull thistle, and cows won't even eat around it. If you have briars, and I see some of this right here, there's some of this in here still. It's horse nettle, but you can see the sheep have cleaned off a lot of the leaves on that. The reason that briars are not good for a pasture with cattle, thistle, horse nettle, is because as a cow eats, it takes its tongue out and grabs a whole swath and wants to pull it in. And if there's briars there, they have to be more selective with that tongue, and then they eat around it. It causes them to work more. And if anything the commercial chicken business taught me was anytime an animal is spending energy doing something besides gaining weight, you're not getting ahead. And so trying to get rid of those in the field is why the sheep are here, and also why I choose to do some real manual work. This bull thistle is just a beast of a plant. And this year, to combat it in this field, it started out about 2 months ago as it started expressing itself, and Mom and I would walk through the field with shovels in hand, little narrow shovels, and stick down beside the plant and pop it up and pull the plant out. And so I probably had 7 or 8 hours involved in that kind of activity, and you miss some of them along the way. You can see how many seeds are in that. They say it takes 7 years for this plant to go away, so we've got some battling to do. After the cows came through the next pass, as we were working our way this way, any of them that were still left standing, because it's pretty clear to see where they are, I came back with the tractor bucket and put it down and like pushed them down with the tractor bucket. So some of them scooped up out of the ground, some pushed down. And then another week later, more have popped up, and so I followed that with a bush hog behind the cows. So every time I'd move them, then I would bush hog that spot. So we've really been battling this stuff to get it out of the field. You know, you can see, like walking out through here, is there some buttercup? Yeah, I got some buttercup here, but 4 years ago, it was a field covered in buttercup. And so just through the animal impact with a combined herd and flock is what's giving me these kind of results. So the pasture that we're walking in, the section right now, this kind of grazing would be the 30-30-30 kind of grazing. I gave them too much area for the land is really what I did. I've been seeing a lot of different videos on whether you do the 30-30-30 method or whether you clear it all the way off. Mm-hmm. How do you manage this?
What does 30-30-30 mean?
That means that they're going to eat 30%, they're going to trample 30%, and they're going to leave 30%. The idea is that leaving the 30% gives you more canopy cover, more solar collectors to grow more grass. The idea behind grazing it down to 10% it's not exactly taking everything. I have a good example of this in the next pasture. It's about what they trample and take equals they've got it all. And the reason people are doing that is because it forces them to eat the cocklebur. It forces them to eat the undesirable stuff. And when you move them off of it, the idea is that fertilization left behind mixed with the rest period is going to let the grasses outperform the weeds. And I'm starting to see that. So I'm not sold on which way is absolutely best for every farm. Like, you got to figure out what's going on in your land.
Right.
But this spring, as they were grazing, I noticed the closer I tied them up, the better off that they did. I had an electric fence right through here. And on this side of it, it probably reached like my optimal of what I like to see, because there's very little left standing.
Right.
But there's still a lot of cover on the ground. Like if we look down through here, you can see, look at that. See how much covering there is on the ground down there?
And then what are the benefits of that?
So the covering on the ground, ooh, right there's some worm castings.
Nice.
Right there. The covering on the ground means that today when it's going to be 90 degrees, it's probably going to be more like 80 degrees at the ground level. And the cooler that you can keep that ground, the less it's going to evaporate water and the healthier it's going to be for the earthworms. That is probably the most distinct change that I've seen since coming back on the farm. When I came back, you could stick a shovel anywhere and you might find a worm. There just weren't a lot of earthworms out here. And through studying regenerative farming and seeing what best practices can produce, if you can stick the shovel in the ground and pick up 20 worms out of a 1 square foot, that means there's probably 10,000 pounds of worms under the ground, and they're providing 1,000 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer to the ground in a very neutral 7 pH fertilizer base. And so now, if we stick a spade in the ground anywhere, we're going to find a handful of worms through the whole farm. And so I don't know exactly what's changed, but I know there's a change for the better. Next week, the cows are coming back to this field, and they're going to be on the road side of it. You can definitely tell where they've grazed here and where they haven't grazed. And they need to work their way up that side of the field over the next 6 days. My issue with grazing them there is that cows need grass, they need water, and they need shade. And as you can see, there's no trees in this field. I have a plan to plant trees in the middle of it. So years down the road, I can graze where I want to with silvopasture kind of trees. You know, the thing you say about trees, the best time to plant them was 20 years ago. Yeah. The next best time is today. So over time, that'll be where I can do that. But what I have to do now to graze animals on that in the summertime is come over, and you can see the H posts, or the 2 taller posts that are in the field over there. That used to be an H-brace system, and I took all that down so that I can create an alleyway from those 2 posts across the whole field here, and then to behind the barn that's over here where my pigs are. So at around 11 or 12 every day, I'll have to move the herd on that side, let them have shade and some grazing over there. And then at 7, when it cools down and the sun will be behind the tree line, move them back and let them spend like 12 hours, 18 hours back over there. So it's gonna be a long week of like setting up lines and moving stuff around. I would love to have some of those mobile shade structures, but with my herd size, I'd probably need 3 of them, and at $7,500 a piece, it's hard to justify that. I'll just move the animals a little bit.